The eagle and the elephant. For centuries, Rome would build the greatest empire the world had ever seen. Its legions were a machine of conquest. Its eagles a symbol of unflinching power. But every empire has its fear, a specter that haunts its sleep. For Rome, that fear had a name: Hannibal. He was not a king who inherited a throne, but a general who inherited a promise sealed in blood as a child, to never be a friend of Rome. He would not just fight the Republic, he would bring it to the very brink of annihilation, orchestrating some of the most brilliant and devastating military victories in all of history. This is the story of the man who crossed the mountains, who outwitted every consul, and who for 16 years was the living nightmare of Rome. The year is 237 BC, the First Punic War has ended. Carthage, the great maritime power of North Africa, has been defeated and humiliated by the rising Roman Republic. Forced to surrender its territories and pay a crushing war indemnity, a bitter hatred simmered in the hearts of its people. No one felt this sting more than Hannibal Barca, Carthage's greatest general. As he prepared to depart for Spain to rebuild Carthaginian strength, he brought his 9-year-old son, Hannibal, to the temple of Baal-Hamon. There, before the gods, Hamilcar made his son swear a sacred oath, an oath that would define his life and shake the foundations of the world. He swore eternal enmity to Rome. In Spain, Hannibal came of age. He learned the art of war from his father, mastering strategy, learning to lead men into battle, and earn their unshakable loyalty, instilling obedience and sacrifice from the lowest recruit to the highest officer. His army would become a family, united by an unbreakable bond of trust and mutual respect. When he took command at the age of 26, he was not just a general. He was the instrument of Carthage's revenge. His target was set. The spark that ignited the world came in 219 BC. Hannibal laid siege to Saguntum, a Roman ally. Rome declared war, confident in its power. They expected a naval war, a fight for islands and coastlines, just as before. But Hannibal would not play by their rules. He would do the unthinkable. He would take the war to them, not by sea, but by land, leading an army of 50,000 infantry, 9,000 cavalry, and 37 war elephants. He began one of the most audacious marches in history. He crossed the Pyrenees, navigated hostile Gallic tribes, and arrived at the foot of a barrier no army had ever dared to cross: the Alps. The crossing was a nightmare of ice, snow, and death. Treacherous paths, ambushes from mountain tribes, and the freezing cold decimated his forces. When Hannibal finally descended into the plains of Italy after 15 days in the high peaks, his army was a shadow of its former self. Barely 26,000 men had survived. Most of his elephants were dead. To the Romans, he looked like a broken man leading a shattered army. They were wrong. In the winter of 218 BC, at the River Trebia, Hannibal gave the Romans their first lesson in humility. He lured the overconfident consul and his legions across the freezing river at dawn, on empty stomachs, cold, wet, and hungry. The Roman soldiers were ambushed and crushed. A Roman consular army had been wiped out. The next spring, Hannibal marched south, slipping past the main Roman armies. The new consul, Gaius Flaminius, raced to catch him. Near Lake Trasimene, Hannibal saw his chance. Under the cover of a thick morning fog, he hid his entire army in the hills, overlooking a narrow path along the lake. The Roman army marched blindly into the kill zone. It was the largest and most successful ambush in military history. The Roman column, unable to form up a retreat, was slaughtered where they stood. 15,000 Romans were killed, including the consul Flaminius. Another army had been annihilated. Rome was gripped by panic. They appointed a dictator, Fabius Maximus, who wisely refused to fight Hannibal directly, shadowing him and wearing down his army. But Roman patience wore thin. In 216 BC, Rome decided to end the threat of Hannibal once and for all. They raised their largest army ever, over 80,000 men, and marched to confront him at a small supply depot named Cannae. The Roman plan was simple: use their overwhelming numbers to punch through the Carthaginian center and crush them. Hannibal knew this, and he planned for it. He arranged his army in a revolutionary formation. His center was thin and weak, designed to bend and give way. His flanks, held by his best African infantry, were held back, hidden in reserve. His superior cavalry held the wings. As the battle began, everything went according to the Roman plan. Their heavy infantry smashed into Hannibal's center, which began a slow, deliberate retreat. The Romans surged forward, deeper and deeper into what they believed was a collapsing line. But on the wings, Hannibal's cavalry destroyed their Roman counterparts. As the Roman legions pushed forward, the trap snapped shut. The elite African infantry swung inwards, attacking the Roman flanks. His cavalry slammed into their rear. The legions of Rome were completely encircled, trapped. What followed was not a battle, but a methodical, industrial-scale slaughter. By sunset, as many as 70,000 Roman soldiers lay dead on the field. It was the darkest day in the history of the Roman Republic. Hannibal had achieved the perfect victory, yet Hannibal did not march on Rome. Lacking the men and siege equipment to take the heavily fortified city, he instead spent the next decade trying to dismantle the Roman alliance system in Italy. But Rome, even after its catastrophic defeats, refused to break. They returned to the Fabian strategy, avoiding battle while slowly rebuilding their strength. And they produced a general who had learned from the master himself, a young commander named Publius Cornelius Scipio. While Hannibal was pinned down in Italy, Scipio took the fight to Carthage, conquering their territories in Spain. Then, he did what Hannibal had done to them. He took the war to the enemy's homeland. Scipio invaded Africa, forcing Carthage to recall its greatest champion. After 16 years in Italy, Hannibal was finally forced to leave, his grand strategy to break Rome's will, ultimately a failure. The final showdown came at Zama in 202 BC here. It was Scipio who proved the more cunning general. He neutralized Hannibal's elephants, and used his superior cavalry to encircle and destroy the Carthaginian army. Hannibal had finally been defeated. The Second Punic War was over. Hannibal spent his final years as a hunted exile, forever pursued by the Romans who could never forgive or forget the fear he had caused. He ultimately took his own life rather than fall into their hands, honoring his oath to the very end. He never destroyed Rome. Instead, in the fires of his invasion, Rome was hardened, its military reformed, its resolve tested to the absolute limit. It emerged from its near-death experience stronger than ever, ready to conquer the world. Hannibal Barca lost the war, but he won an immortal legacy. The brilliant enemy, the master of strategy, the man who remains, even now, Rome's greatest nightmare. Rome might have triumphed, but Hannibal's brilliance on the battlefield lives on in history.